The goals for this project were to enable more coolant types, to enable selection of more than one type at once, and to control pressure where relevant. This requires synchronization with the post-processor, which is of course provider's responsibility. In a preference, we have added a new page called additional coolant types, and if enable additional coolant types is not checked, then what we see is the default old coolant types that we have had since ever. If the enable additional coolant types is checked, then there are additional 6 coolant type to choose from. We activate them by clicking the checkbox, and then we should give them a name, which will be the one that is seen while selection in the procedure itself. In addition, there is an option to activate pressure where relevant and set the default pressure values. In the procedure itself, if the enable additional coolant was not checked in preferences, then the selection is exactly as we remember from the past. If enable additional coolants is checked in the preferences, then while clicking on the coolant selection button, we have a new additional coolant selection dialog. The user can select multiple coolant types for one procedure and can set the pressure by overriding the default from the preferences if relevant. The grid parameters will show now if it will show if multiple coolants were selected, and will show the name of the single coolant selection if indeed one coolant was selected. In gun drill, it is exactly the same thing. If the option is selected for multiple, then we have the same coolant selection dialog. Same goes for multi-cutter. Again, the same coolant selection dialog. Even in the cutter library, if we can set the coolants per tool per material, then we can either use the defaults old values or use the new multiple coolant option with the same dialog. In the post processor, we need to synchronize with the preferences as I've said before. Okay, we have to give for the additional coolant, we have to give the proper on and off commands. And in the post itself, in the EX2, we have to add the code to support to output the new coolant types. This, of course, is post developer's responsibility. So how does it look in Cimatron? If I edit a procedure and go to add coolant, what I see is the old options that we had since ever. Okay, going to the preferences under NC, there is this additional coolant types. I can see here that the option to enable additional coolants is not checked, which is why I can only see the old options that we had before. As you can see, they cannot be unchecked or deactivated, and it is impossible to change their names. If I check the option, then I have these additional 6 options to work with. I can activate either of them by checking the box and setting the name which I will see when I select in the procedure. Let's say that we call this flush. And close the parameters, the preferences. Now if I edit the procedure and go to coolant selection, I see here a new button which says coolant off. If I click on it, I have this new dialog. I can use whatever coolants that I want. Let's say I use choose these ones. I can override the pressure value, and I say OK. At this point, here it will say multiple coolants. If I select only one, let's say I select only the high pressure, then it will only show high pressure here. I go and reselect as it was before and say OK and save and calculate the procedure. Now if I post this procedure, what I get is the following. Here you can see the three coolant options which I have selected for outputting, and the pressure where it is relevant. As I've mentioned before, the post need to be synchronized with the preferences, and the preference needs to be set according to what the customer has on his machines. Of course, the post is set or customized per single machine only. This was all about additional coolant in Cimatron 15.